Hey, what's up, Lindsay? And all other aspiring drummers out there, as I always give my little welcome to everyone. Wanted to help you out with that figure of learning some syncopation in the bass drum. So I know you had mentioned in one of your other comments that you're trying to place it on the E of, I guess, B2, or maybe B4, don't know. But regardless, it's really just getting comfortable with that motion in your right hand, because it's not going to stack, right? So if you're playing 16th notes in the bass drum, but you're playing 8th notes in your ride pattern, then your hand's most likely going to be up in the air, right, as your bass drum note's coming down. So one thing that I recommend with my students specifically is to play it stacked first, just so you get used to the placement of where the bass drum's at, and it's going to be easier for you rather than trying to figure out, you know, your motion of getting it syncopated right at first. And basically, I mean, I have some different materials here to show you too, but if you look here, number 3, that's on the E of B2. Now I know in the ride pattern it has 16ths and some open closed hi-hat, don't worry about that, okay? But what we're gonna do is we're gonna practice it a couple different ways. So, and these are 2-bar patterns, so just kind of ignore that second bar. But that's what it would look like visually, and if you're counting it, you know, 1, 2 E, 3, 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4. Okay? So if we're playing it with 16th notes, it'll be stacked, and then if we're playing it with 8th notes, it's going to be syncopated, right? So basically what you're trying to figure out is your motion of when does the bass drum note come down. It's all just up-down motion. And we'll play it nice and slow first, just with our 16ths, so you get used to the motion of it, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2 E, 3, 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2 E, 3, 4. 1, 2 E, 3, 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4. Okay, so just kind of getting comfortable with it, you know, and start nice and slow first, but stacking it'll be easier for you, okay? Then comes the harder part of getting the syncopated part with it. If you exaggerate the motion in your right hand, so your right hand, we're both righties, so, but anyone else out there too, depending on what your right hand is, what your dominant hand is, just exaggerate that motion for your 8th notes, okay? And one thing we say, we call it a stutter, so not, you know, trying to make fun of people stuttering or anything like that, but that's just what we call it within the drumming world, all right? So first, naturally, it kind of, when you're playing a 16th down here, your right side wants to do what your right side wants to do, right? So it's hard to kind of keep that motion at first of learning the syncopation. Now, in a previous comment, Lindsay, I had mentioned 3 different bass drum figures. One was a dotted 8th tied to a 16th. 1, 2, 3, 4. The other was an 8th tied to 2 16ths. 1 and a 3 and a 1 and a 2 and 3 and a 4. And then the other one was 2 16ths tied to an 8. So to start that, you know, it would be a pickup basically coming into beat 1. But if you just start the pattern with 1 and, or beat 1, then every time thereafter play E and a, that kind of thing, okay? So 1 and a 3, 4, and like a 1 and a 3, complete groupings of 3, 4, 1 E and 2 and 3 E and 4 and 1, 4, kind of wherever you want to place it, but it's a grouping of 3, 1 E and a 3, 1 E and a 3. So I'm just kind of moving it around there, but those 3 figures basically, okay? Depending on whatever beat you put it on. The very first one you should practice, and it's a good one to practice, dotted 8th tied to a 16th. I'm not sure how comfortable you are with that yet, but it gets you used to the very first part of that syncopation, where your hand's going to be up in the air when that bass drum note comes down. 1, 2, 3, 4. So see how I'm exaggerating my motion? So that way it's easier to kind of fit that bass drum note in when my hand's up in the air, and then you land on the note. I wouldn't recommend playing power strokes, you know, but I'm just trying to really exaggerate my motion so you can see what I made of that. Because if down here, it's harder to kind of fit that in. And what the stutter is this, is 1, 2. So where you add that extra note, because your right side wants to do what your right side wants to do, right? So you might be having the same issue with playing it on the E of B2. That kind of a thing, where you want to add that extra note. Where you kind of add that extra note, we call that's the stutter, okay? So I know I kind of covered a lot of different things there in that quick, short period of time. But 3 different bass drum patterns, dotted 8th tied to a 16th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8th tied to 2/16, 1 and a, 3 and a, and then 2/16 tied to an 8. 1 E N, 3 E N, 1 E N, 3 E N. If you get used to playing those 3 figures first within playing syncopation in 8th notes, so that way, see, I'm really keeping that motion up here, that I can, get comfortable with where does that bass drum fall while my hands are up in the air. So you know that if it's going to be on that 16th, your hand will be up in the air. Some of them, you'll be coming down and landing on the note. That kind of a motion. So you just have to get comfortable with all those different bass drum patterns, Lindsay. That's really the thing of it. There's no shortcuts around it. I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but you just have to sit there and get comfortable with it. Exaggerate your motion. Make sure you count your syllables. Practice those different patterns. And, if you need a visual little reminder of what it'll look like, remember to start with 16th so it's stacked. Thing, then turn it to 8ths. So your hand's going to be up in the air again. 1, 2, E, 3, 4. 1, 2. So you can see just kind of getting that big motion, but you don't want to get used to playing with that stutter. That's the thing, is like, don't train yourself the wrong way, or don't practice a bad habit, that kind of thing. You don't want to play with that stutter and just, kind of settle for it. It's really important to try to keep that, because that's what we intend to do, right? Is keep the 8th notes going steady. That's your timekeeper. This is your tempo right here. And kind of think about it that way, is that your lead hand, that's your metronome right there. That's your click. That's, as long as that's consistent, everything else underneath it will be consistent and fall in the right place. But if this is kind of starting, stopping, adding notes, taking away notes, that kind of thing, then it's kind of feels like it's herky-jerky, It's like start, stop, speed up, slow down, that kind of thing, rather than just having that constant motion. Okay? So, a little crash course there in it. Almost at 10 minutes already, but just trying to provide you with lots of information, of little tips of how you can practice it. But as I recommend, get comfortable with those first 3 figures first. I mean, even the grouping of 3 of playing like 2/16 tied to an 8th might be tricky. So just, kind of work with first. I'm trying to find the page here for you. So, and this is within the Alfred's book 1. This is out of Alfred's book 2, the other page that I showed you with the E of B on the E of B2. But this page is great. So you can see, like, this is a good visual representation of how your 16th note in your bass drum, it's not going to fall, it's not going to stack with anything up in your ride pattern, right? So it's kind of good to practice just a dotted 8th tied to a 16th first, so you get used to that motion and you get comfortable with having your hands up in the air while it's not being stacked. But I recommend practicing it that way. So just stack it first and then get comfortable with your motion, exaggerate it, and then try a few different syncopated bass drum patterns and try it, nice and slow. Just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then same thing with an 8th tied to 2/16. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and so you can see how some of them are going to stack, some of them are going to be while your hand's up in the air. 1 and is going to stack, and the 3 and is the that doesn't. And then 1 E and 3 E and. That's kind of how I'll have my students practice it too, Lindsay, is playing like 4 bars of each pattern. So then, 4 bars of dotted eighth tied to a 16th, and then an eighth tied to 2 16ths, 2 16ths tied to an eighth, and then maybe adding some 2-bar patterns with playing on the E of B2. But this page is fantastic. It's one of the best pages out of this entire book too, as far as grooves, because it gets you used to playing in those 2-bar patterns rather than playing 1-bar patterns, and then putting all these different 16th notes in the bass drum in different spots. So you can see like they use 2 16ths to an eighth, or actually 1 E and then an eighth tied to a 16th or 2 16ths, that kind of thing. So that way you're practicing a lot of syncopated figures and first getting comfortable, playing them stacked, but then play them syncopated. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I know it's kind of a quick little crash course, but I want to make sure that you kind of philosophically understand like just how to get the physicality of it out, and just how to physically do it and kind of approach it mentally, so that way you're exaggerating that motion, you're getting comfortable with having your hands up in the air while you're playing notes in the bass drum. Another good thing just to practice too is constant 16ths in the bass drum, with eighth notes in your hand, or even quarter notes in your hand. So if you're playing quarter notes up here and eighth notes down here, that'll also be syncopated, right? 1 and 3 and. So it depends. You could practice things you already know how to play, but just change your note value in your right hand, and then it'll either stack it or syncopate it, that kind of thing. So just get comfortable with playing. Even those constant 16ths would sound like 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Or with eights. Stack it. And then just put it on the E's. 1 E, 3, 4 E, 1 E, 3 E, 1 E, 3 E, 1 E, 3, and then syncopate it. That kind of thing. So there's all different types of exercises and warm-ups you can do, but syncopation is not easy. There are easy syncopated figures, but it gets pretty steep pretty quick. So I recommend practicing it in a methodical way, and really biting off little chunks first of how you can practice that with whatever note value you're going to put in the bass drum with those nice eighth notes, so you don't practice the stutter, that kind of thing, because that's the natural. I did the same thing when I first was learning it. I was like, your brain's kind of trying to figure out how to get that foot to come down while your hand just keeps those eighths. But if you exaggerate the motion, it'll help. Okay. All right, Lindsay. Well, I hope that helps anybody else out there too. Let me know though in the comments if you have any questions, and just take it methodically. That's really the most important point, and just take the easier figures first, like a dotted eighth tied to a 16th, or even eighth tied to 2 16ths is not all that difficult, because the first 2 notes are stacked. The 1 and 3 and is stacked, is just the 1 and 3 and it's just that's not stacked. So if you kind of practice it that way, then you're going to get more comfortable. Once you do place it on the E, your body's just going to be comfortable keeping that constant ride pattern of eighth notes, and displacing that beat onto the E of B2 or B4, wherever it's at in the pattern you're trying to learn. Okay? All right, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Happy drumming, and good to see ya. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.